Hi, I'm Pamela. I was asked by Pro-Life Wisconsin to share the story of my crisis pregnancy with you. I was 28 years old and happily married, so not expecting to have to face the decision of whether or not to have an abortion. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. My husband and I were trying to conceive our third child together when I found a lump in my breast. So I went to my OB/GYN and he did an exam and he stated that he thought it was probably a fibroid tumor, non-cancerous and nothing to worry about. But he said that if I wanted to be 100% sure, I could go see a radiologist and get a mammogram and maybe a biopsy done. So after thinking about that for a week or two, I decided to go in and have that done. And so we found a radiologist. I went in for the appointment and he did the mammogram, which didn't show anything because I was so young, and then they did a biopsy. And they asked me if I was pregnant at the time, and I said, I hope so, we're trying to conceive, but it's too early to test. So they recommended that I go home and take a pregnancy test, and they would call me with the results of the biopsy. So that evening, a pregnancy test confirmed that I was pregnant, so we were very excited with that news. And 2 days later, as I was feeding my little 9-month-old Joseph his baby cereal, peaches, and oatmeal, I got a phone call from the hospital, and it was the breast care coordinator, and she said, Pam, I have some bad news. It turns out your tumor is malignant. So that was devastating, and I remember holding Joseph and crying and praying and thinking, I'm not going to be here to see this little baby go to kindergarten, and and the baby that I'm carrying isn't going to make it, and it was really a hard morning. So I called my husband and we went right to the hospital to meet with the doctors, and the surgeon was there that would do the lumpectomy or mastectomy, and she explained to us that if I wanted to keep the pregnancy, that doing a lumpectomy was not an option for us because the radiologist would not do radiation on me if I was pregnant, and with lumpectomy you always follow up with radiation for breast cancer. So we said, okay, we would do the full mastectomy, and because I wanted to keep the pregnancy and save my baby. So she said she would be fine with that, but she had to let me know that I would be under anesthesia for several hours, and that could affect the baby's health and could potentially cause a miscarriage. And as long as I was okay with that, knowing that she would go ahead and perform the mastectomy. So we scheduled that surgery for Monday morning, and this was a Friday, so I had a couple of days to prepare and pray and really think about what was happening. And on Monday morning, I went in for the surgery, and the anesthesiologist was there waiting for me, and he explained to me that he would administer the anesthesia, but I had to agree not to hold him liable for any problems with the baby. He explained that I would be under anesthesia for so many hours that it could cause mental retardation potentially for my baby if the baby made it. So that was a very hard thing to hear as I was being taken into surgery. And that after 7 hours of being under, I came to in my hospital room. I don't remember the recovery room, but when I woke up in my hospital room, the oncologist, who I hadn't met with yet because she had been out of town, was waiting to speak with me. And the first thing she said after introducing herself was that she recommended that I have an abortion. And I said, I've already told the doctors I don't want to have an abortion, I don't believe in that, and I want to save my baby. And she said, well, I have to tell you that as your oncologist, you're my patient, and my goal is to save your life, and if we want to save your life, the best thing for you to do would be to have an abortion. And she explained that the hormones for my pregnancy would speed the growth of the cancer in my body wherever it had spread to. They knew that after doing the mastectomy that the cancer had spread to other parts of my breast, and that it also had spread to my lymph nodes. So she was saying that we needed to start chemotherapy immediately to save my life, and that keeping the pregnancy would speed the growth of the cancer, decreasing my chances for survival. She also said that the baby would probably not make it through the chemotherapy anyway because case studies show that with chemotherapy administered during a pregnancy that there's high rates of malformation and spontaneous abortion from the chemotherapy drugs themselves. So she thought the best thing to do for me would be to end the pregnancy and focus on saving my life. So I told her that's not what I wanted to do. I cried. I said I needed to think about that. And then as soon as I got out of the hospital, we decided to go to another hospital for a second opinion. And we met with their head oncologist and radiologist. And unfortunately, they gave us the same exact opinion. They said that the best thing for me would be to have an abortion and focus on saving my life and go through the chemotherapy and then hopefully be able to have more children later. And my husband asked them both, he said, if your daughter were pregnant with your grandchild, would you really tell her to have an abortion in this situation? And they both said yes. So at that point, we were in a very difficult situation because my husband and his whole family were very swayed by what the doctor's opinion was. Because of their strong opinions, they were being swayed to agree with them that I should have an abortion, which was very difficult for me because I needed support and encouragement for my beliefs that we need to do whatever we could to save the baby. Fortunately, my family, my parents were very supportive and just said that whatever happens, we'll be there for you and you have to do your best and to save the baby and God will take care of the rest. And they asked the priest that I'd grown up with from my hometown in northern Wisconsin to come down and talk with me, and he did, and we had a wonderful talk and he was very helpful. And one of the things he said that I'll never ever forget was, he asked me, he said, Pamela, if your house was on fire and Joseph and Adam were trapped inside the fire, would you walk through the fire to save them? And I said, of course, you wouldn't be able to keep me out of that fire. I would be in there in a heartbeat. And he said, well, this is what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do for the baby, for this baby that you're carrying. And I said, I know, you're right. I don't know why we're even talking about abortion. I'm not going to have an abortion. And from that point on, we made the firm decision to just do whatever we could to save my life, but also keep my baby and hope for the best. So we started doing research on what happens with babies who go through chemotherapy during pregnancy. And all of the information that we were first getting was very negative. It was about malformations, spontaneous abortions, and so we were very discouraged. But we had a woman at the hospital, the breast care coordinator, was doing some research on the databases there, and she came up with an article that was written by a doctor at MD Anderson Cancer Clinic in Houston, Texas. And it was a very positive article. He had been doing a study on pregnant women with breast cancer, and he had treated 26 women in the last few years that had had breast cancer chemotherapy during their pregnancies with good results. And so we were so encouraged by this news, and we flew down to Houston immediately to meet with him. And he explained that as long as we waited until the 13th week of pregnancy to start the chemotherapy, that my baby would have a very good chance for being normal and born healthy, and that he couldn't say what percentage of decreased chance in survival I would have by waiting for a couple of months to start the chemotherapy, but he didn't think that there was any evidence to show that it really would make that big of a difference for me if I waited. He also had special chemotherapy drugs that were safer for the baby. He had developed this protocol that used only certain drugs that he thought were much safer for the baby than others. And so that's what we decided to do. He prescribed the chemotherapy and I was able to have it administered back home. And we started the 13th week with the chemotherapy, and it was 6 cycles of chemo, 3 weeks apart. And after the first cycle, I lost my hair, so then I was bald, pregnant, and one-breasted. So not the greatest thing in the world for me, but my husband used to tease me that I was the best-looking bald, pregnant, one-breasted woman he'd ever seen. So we tried to keep our sense of humor. We prayed a lot, and we went through the chemotherapy. And after the 5th round of chemotherapy, unfortunately my water broke and I went into premature labor. So I was rushed to the hospital and they were able to stop the labor, and I was on bed rest for 2 weeks. And after those 2 weeks, they started to think there was an infection setting in, so they induced labor, and I gave birth to a 3-pound, 1-ounce baby boy. So we're very excited that Thomas, when he was first born, I got to hold him for just a brief few minutes, and then they took him away to the ICU, and we were so excited that he seemed to be doing well. Unfortunately, just a few minutes later, we got the bad news that he had a grade 4 bleed on the brain, which is the worst kind of bleed for a preemie, and that they didn't think he was going to make it. So we'd come so far, and this was so devastating that we just were kind of in shock and didn't know what to do. And the doctor said we would have to decide pretty quickly if we wanted to do surgery to put shunts in his brain to try to relieve the pressure, or if we would want to just let him go and let him die. And I said, there's no way that we've come this far to let him die. We're going to do whatever we can to save my baby. I'm not giving up on Thomas. We named him Thomas III. So baby Thomas was in the ICU, and they were doing the ultrasound and CAT scans on his brain, and they called in the neurosurgeon, and we're getting ready to do surgery. But the surgeon said, let's wait until we absolutely have to do it. You know, when the brain really gets to the point where he can't survive without the surgery, we'll do it quickly. And so we kept praying and waiting. And little baby Thomas was hooked up to the IVs and the feeding tube and monitors on his heart, but he kept holding his own, and he wasn't getting worse. So every day they would do the ultrasound or CAT scan on his brain, and they could see the bleed was still there, but it wasn't getting worse. And he was still doing okay, so they kept putting off the surgery. And then on the 7th day, I was driving to the hospital because I couldn't stay there anymore, and I was praying my rosary, and I got just an intense feeling of peace and just joy, and I felt really positive about what I would hear when I got to the hospital. And when I got there, there was a resident doing the ultrasound on Thomas's brain because the neonatologist was busy, and she was doing the ultrasound that morning. And she was doing the ultrasound and moving the little monitor around on his head and looking for the bleed, and she couldn't find it. And I'm standing right next to her, and I can't see it either. And so she looked at the scan from the previous day, and she could see it, and then she couldn't see it on the screen. And so she said, I'll go get the doctor and see what he thinks. So she went to get the neonatologist, and when they came back, he did the ultrasound, and he couldn't find it either. And he said, I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's gone. It's completely gone. There's nothing left behind. His brain looks completely normal and healthy. And I said, I can explain it. It's a miracle. And truly, we do believe it was a miracle of prayer and just such a blessing. And from that point on, baby Thomas, grew stronger and was able to learn how to feed on his own and drink from a bottle. And after 2 months, we were able to bring him home. And at that point, he weighed 5 pounds. So we were just so happy and thrilled. And Thomas has no health problems. He is a healthy, normal, happy child. Actually, our most angelic, loving, giving, sweet, peaceful child. And I can't imagine life without him. So we are so thankful that we did not listen to the doctors out of the fear and the anxiety we were experiencing during my cancer. We're so happy that we did not have the abortion. I can't imagine what my life would be like if I had to live with that, if we didn't have Thomas. And I might not have been able to have more children if I had had that abortion and gone into premature menopause like many young women do when they go through chemotherapy. But because I was pregnant, that didn't happen to me. And also, I think it's interesting that new research shows that babies inside the mother's womb can actually give the mother their antibodies to help them fight disease. So I like to think that Thomas was actually helping me fight cancer while I was fighting to save his life, and that we're both cancer survivors. We're very blessed when we were able to bring Thomas home from the hospital, and by the grace of God, I was pregnant a year later with Nicholas, and then 4 years later I gave birth to my daughter, Teresa, who we call Tess. And then after Tess's birth, we decided we wanted to do something as a family to show our thanks to God, so we adopted a little girl from Guatemala, Ana Maria, and we brought her home the week that she turned 4, and she's 9 now. So we've been very blessed. We have 6 children, Adam, Joseph, Thomas, Nicholas, Tess, and Ana Maria, and we're so thankful for these beautiful, beautiful children in our lives and all the blessings they bring. So I hope my story gives you hope that even in these extreme crisis pregnancies, that there's room for prayer and hope and trust in God that things will turn out okay, and that you don't have to take the life of your baby for any reason, and that you should trust and just have hope and pray and know that things can turn out okay. So thank you for listening, and I hope that somehow my story helps you.